Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Planning Committee of Woking Borough Council on 10 May 2023. This meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting with committee members present in the room this evening, whilst some of the officers are attending the meeting in person and some connecting via Microsoft Teams. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. My name is Councillor Shel Shepherd-Dubé, and I chair the meeting. The Planning Committee consists of 9 elected borough councillors who are supported by a variety of professional officers. This is a quasi-judicial committee with formal set procedures which must be adhered to. Firstly, the planning officer will present the application, and then only those registered speakers will be able to speak, and they will be invited to address the committee. No one else, including borough councils, town and parish councils, agents, applicants, objectors, supporters, are permitted to address the committee and ask questions or disrupt the meeting. Everyone has had the opportunity to comment on each application throughout the consultation process. Please note there is a strict time limit of 3 minutes per category of speaker, those being town and parish council, objectors, supporters, or those borough members affected by the application. Members of the committee are more impressed by the quality of what you have to say rather than how long you speak, but above all, please stay within your time limit. Following the registered speakers, members of the committee will discuss and debate each application and seek clarification from the council's professional planning officers in order to try and reach a decision. The decision reached by the committee may or may not agree with what was recommended by the presenting case officer. Finally, it is the committee's responsibility to determine any valid planning application presented before it using current national and local planning policies and relevant decisions of the relevant planning inspectorate. Our role is not to suggest alternatives to the applications, nor to consider whether they're a good idea, whether they are needed, whether they're too costly, whether there are alternative uses of the site or more suitable uses of the land elsewhere. If you are joining us remotely, please ensure your camera is switched on only when you are speaking and that your microphone is unmuted only when you are speaking. Any apologies?
No, Chair, no apologies.
Minutes of the previous meeting, would somebody like to propose them? Somebody like to second? Okay. Any declarations of interest? David?
Yes, thank you. I must declare a personal interest in as much as I'm a member of the Planning Committee of Finchampstead Parish Council, and also with comments associated with the Parish Council and otherwise on items 113 and 115 of this evening's agenda. That's applications 211335 and applications 222805. Just to declare that I have made comments on these earlier based on preliminary information. Clearly, the information available has increased as the applications have proceeded, and I do approach this meeting with an open mind to listen to the evidence tonight.
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare a personal interest for item number 211335. For the same reason as last time, in that I listed the application as the ward member for Finchampstead South, but I will view this application with an open mind and consider it on its merits. Also, in addition, my son has previously received cricket coaching in the past from Phil West, who would be running the cricket nets. Thank you.
Al?
It's on application 221797, Crockers, Rushy Way. Well, one, that it's in my ward, but also that on Early Town Council this has been discussed when I was present, but I will be approaching this with an open mind.
Application should be deferred.
Thank you, Chair. Application number 213610, that's agenda item 117, has been withdrawn from the agenda.
Okay. Application 211335, White Horse Lane. And Mark Croucher, sir, the officer. Would you like to present, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm virtual this evening.
Okay.
I'll just quickly share my screen. So hopefully the members can all see that. So as on the screen, I'll just enlarge it actually. Okay, so as on the screen, this is a full application for a proposed change of use of a section of agricultural land to recreational all-weather cricket track and wicket with mobile cricket cage plus fencing, parking and associated to works. I'll give the same presentation as I did the previous committee, just for clarity. So this is Linfield House here, just outlined in red, and I've got some photos sort of zooming in on that. Finchampstead is further to the north, and you can see where Whitehorse Lane is in relation to that. So this is a bit more of a zoomed in location plan. So the application site is outlined in red. The sort of square where the cursor is, that's where the proposed parking would be. You'll see the foam mast is just located here, and the rectangle here is where the cricket strip will be. And I've got some aerial photos to show in relation to Linfield House, the property. So this is an aerial photo just to show it in a bit more context. So the cricket strip will be roughly where this fencing is here, and I'll get onto that in a bit more detail shortly. Again, you can see Whitehorse Lane here. You can probably just see it through the tree lines. If you see in the top right-hand corner of the screen, this is the bridle way to the east here, which is referred to. So here I've just put the block plan next to an aerial photo. There was some discussion on site about where the actual cricket strip would be located, and we were trying to sort of work out where it'd be. Initially, I advised some of the members that I thought it was going where these sort of blobs are here, which are actually manhole covers. Actually, the actual strip would be to the south of that, so it would be where this fence is here, and I've got an overlay just to show that in a bit more detail. So the actual pitch would be here. And this is the overlay drawing I was talking about. Just to give it a health warning, this is something that I've put together myself. It's not been submitted by the applicant, but I'm hoping it gives members some sort of concrete indication of whereabouts it's going on site. So here you can see the existing fence line here. So the cricket strip would be located broadly over the top of that here. It would be roughly 10 metres from this garage and about 12 metres from the side of the house. And it would jut out from the existing fence line to sort of beyond the telephone mast. And we noted that on site how far it can. So it'd come out by about 3 metres from here, and then it would carry on there. So hopefully that provides it in a bit more context to the members on the site visit and also the members who weren't able to attend. So this is a picture and a elevation of the mobile cricket cage. So it will be 3 metres in height, and it'll be on wheels, so it could be wheeled around as well. And this is just details that are submitted of the actual strip, just to say a section drawing of it, and also just what it would look like in context. Here are some photos from the site. So this is the existing fence line I was talking about. So the strip would be located broadly on top of that. And then the fence would sort of jut out 3 metres further beyond the mast here. Moving to the bottom left picture, this is where the proposed parking would be located. Moving on to the top right, so this is looking eastwards, and the sort of bridleway is sort of in the background there. And again, the strip would be roughly where the fence line is there. And the bottom right, this is looking back the other way, but this is broadly where the sort of proposed parking would be located. So these are just some street views of Whitehorse Lane, just to give you an indication of the nature of it. So starting with the top left, this is looking southwards, site on the left there, and you can just make out the entrance as well. Bottom right is looking northwards, and again, you can see the vegetation to the right and the access to the right, and the strip would be just to the right of that picture. So these are some photos from the bridleway. The bridleway is about 250 metres to the east, and you can see it rises in level. So I'll just put a circle just so you can make out where Linfield House is there. And you may just be able to see the mast, so the pitch would be roughly located in line with that mast broadly. And again, this is further down the bridleway, sort of further north. You can see Linfield House and the mast behind it, and the pitch would be sort of just behind the house and also just poking out from the house a bit as well. So that's roughly where it'd be located. So that concludes my presentation for that, but I think it'd be helpful for members if I just sort of give a brief explanation of how we've arrived at this position. So the application was originally approved in August 2021. It was then judicially reviewed, and the consent order for the judicial review which the council agreed to, was the council failed to ensure that it has sufficient expertise to address the objection to the proposed development that the sudden and surprising noise of a ball striking a cricket bat would spook horses being recreationally ridden down White Horse Lane. The report was inadequate in addressing those reasons. So the reason for the judicial review was actually very specific in terms of that. So after it was quashed, it comes back to the local authority for redetermination. We then taken on board those comments, employed an equine specialist, and you'll see the comments in the report and also quoted. Although there was no requirement to, we also decided to reconsult neighbouring properties with the equine specialist comments online, so people could see that and make comments, and these have been filtered back into our recommendation, how we've approached it. A draft report was then written, and that was checked over by an independent barrister who reviewed it, and that's essentially the report is before the committee now. So although the judicial review is for very specific reasons, to advise the committee that you are assessing it afresh, you're just assessing the application as new, as if it had just come in. So that's how it should be assessed. So to conclude, Chairman, the officer's recommendation is that the application complies with the development plan as a whole, and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions as set out in the agenda, and I'll pass it back over to yourself.
The site visit was taken place before this meeting. The people who attended were myself, David, Rebecca, Al, Andrew, on the 9th site visit on the 9th of May.
So we now call Nicola Greenwood.
And we now call Nicola Greenwood.
Good evening. Tonight I'm speaking as British Horse Society Access and Bridleways Officer for Wokingham. There is genuine concern for the safety of all road users if this application is approved, with the nearest corner of the nets in the proposed location approximately 8 to 10 metres from the road boundary, in very close proximity to a blind bend and on a single track lane that enjoys heavy recreational use. There is no concern about the proximity of the nets to the nearest bridleway, Finchampstead 11, which measures approximately 250 metres from the nearest corner of the nets. Visibility is also very good across the open fields towards Linfield House. The British Horse Society conducted an equine census in April 21 with the help from DEFRA, who confirmed that there are 3,938 horses registered to owners living within the Wokingham Borough. This is almost double the number confirmed in 2012. 2,024 horses are registered to owners living within approximately an hour's ride of White Horse Lane. It was suggested by the council's appointed equine expert, Mr McBride, that the cricket facility could notify the local establishments when cricket sessions were running, but there are at least 117 places, commercial and private, where horses are kept within an hour's ride of White Horse Lane, making this totally impractical. The BHS advice document on the impact of noise on horses states environments which are likely to produce noise should be avoided in the vicinity of routes used by equestrians, particularly byways, bridleways and minor roads, which should be protected for quiet recreation and exercise. It goes on to say police and military horses have proven their resilience to noise, but the training involved is highly skilled and the horses are very carefully selected. Some horses would never reach the same acceptance with the same training. Such training is beyond the scope of most horse owners. Therefore, it should be assumed that noise is likely to be distressing to horses which are not accustomed to it. A horse will be concerned with many sounds which humans are able to recognise and dismiss instantly. End quote. The bridleway network in Wokingham is fragmented, with only 10% of public rights-of-way classified as bridleway. Quiet lanes like White Horse Lane are therefore essential for local horse riders to avoid busy main roads. Noise of baton ball will not be consistent or sustained. It will not be rhythmical and therefore predictable like a metronome. The sound of a vehicle engine running is sustained noise and easier for the horse to assess and accept. Horses will not easily be able to see where the cricket noise is coming from, because although the hedge may appear a bit thinner in winter, it will be much more opaque in the summer months. Horses will more readily accept sounds they can easily see the origin of. The lack of visibility and associated risks this poses at this site is something I don't believe Mr McBride fully addressed in his report. Any horse walking at 4 miles per hour can spook suddenly at 54 miles per hour for seeing or hearing something unexpected, either shooting forwards, sideways or whipping round with little or no warning. If you plan to approve this application, please make it a condition of approval that additional horse rider signs are placed at 150 metres either side of the site. Place the net 60 metres minimum from the White Horse Lane boundary to allow the
Could you-
trend to follow the trend through the
Could you
borough.
please sum up?
Yeah, alternatively built as an indoor soundproof facility. Thank you for listening.
Rebecca?
Thank you. I'm not going to go over what I said last time. I made my comments clear. I still thought we were going to get proper details of exactly where this net was going to go. We were told this yesterday when we were at the planning visit, the site visit. And if we're judging this on an application that's here in front of us, for me, I am still unsure about where this net is actually going to go. The words have been roughly 10 metres, just behind the creek. You know, there's still not clear in my head where this cricket net is actually going to be placed. There is debate over the boundary of the actual so-called garden, and I still don't think those points have been addressed. And I really do think we've got an expert here who's not even looking at these issues. She's talking about the impact that this would have on horses. This is a blind corner. The visibility is poor. We have a mixture of horses, pedestrians, cyclists, runners, a variety of people that use this road. And I do think it is something this committee really does need to consider. Thank you.
David?
Thank you, Chair. I thoroughly endorse everything that Councillor Margetts has just said. There's no need to repeat it. It seems astonishing to me that we can be this far into an application and still be uncertain of where the boundaries of the property are and where the application site is. From what I can see, this is complicated because the garden of the property is actually encroached already upon agricultural land. This application, should it be granted, will use more agricultural land, admittedly not large quantities, but we come from a position of sort of opaqueness as to where these lines should be on the map, and nothing I've seen either in the documentation or on the site visit made it any clearer to me. I think that is regrettable. I can't comment upon the impact of cricket balls on horses. I approach both of those with great caution. But I do listen very attentively to the experts that we have in the audience, and indeed, of course, the professional opinion that was given. That's a balance of judgment. But I think in all balances of judgment, safety has to be at the top of the list of considerations. I am particularly confused by the description that we are changing the use of a section of agricultural land to a recreational weather cricket track. Now, recreational weather cricket track isn't a classification of land that I'm familiar with. I'm familiar with agricultural land and I'm familiar with commercial land. And I would like some clarification from the officers, if we can get it, on whether this is actually a change of use from agricultural land to commercial. Because if it is, and I suspect that is what is the background to a lot of questions about this, that's a change we only ever make once. And once it's gone from agriculture to commercial, that's what it becomes. So can I ask some clarification on that?
Did one of the officers comment?
Yes, the change of use would be to sui generis, so it'd be a use in its own specific use class, because as members noted, I think previously in the meeting, that this is quite a bespoke and unique situation, so it would be a sui generis use.
Anything else? Andrew's next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mark, and also Nicola, for your presentations. As has been noted again this evening, this is not the first time that this application has been considered. It has indeed been subject to a judicial review that we were reminded tonight focused on important matters relating to the potential impacts that this activity might have on horses. But we are also told and reminded again this evening that this application is to be assessed as fresh, okay, in its own right as a new application. Now, in my case, the site visit allayed some of my previous concerns regarding the potential impacts of noise, access to the site, parking, and relationship to the wider area. However, and this has already been alluded to, I think, in some of the comments made by Councillor Cornish, the visit and also confirmed by the case officer, that approval would allow for a further incursion into designated agricultural land, because the fence line we were shown would be moved approximately 3 metres further onto what is designated agricultural land, and that it would change and there would be a change in use of that land to commercial use. I do not believe that there are any special circumstances to justify this. And unless there are new and compelling counter-arguments during the remainder of this discussion, I will be voting to refuse this application for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go on the site visit, so I need to ask you to bear that in mind when you hear my comments on the application. I have a lot of sympathy for the point Andrew's just made, and there may be a further complication that we need to take into account. I presume, because we now know that the cricket strip will go effectively across where the fence currently is, the fence will have to be moved. So that creates that incursion because the fence is being moved. It's pretty, I have to say it's pretty unusual to have a cricket net next to a house, but it's even more unusual to have it right next to a fence. The very nature of a cricket net is that shots will be played with a cross bat. What are they going to do if they hit the fence? Are they going to bounce back? I don't think this is a good location. You can't move it closer to the house because the manhole covers will create all sorts of problems. You'll have a very uneven surface and the ball will bounce unpredictably and dangerously. So there are, in addition to the incursion on the countryside, there are other problems associated with this precise location. I also have a lot of sympathy with the concerns about safety. I did raise these at the last committee meeting when we discussed this. It does seem to me to be close, very close to a highway that's used by riders, cyclists, and pedestrians, as well as car drivers. But the key issue in planning terms, I suspect, is the one that Andrew's highlighted.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. What quality agricultural land is this? What crops are being actually grown on this land, or is it just grass? I'm just curious, that's all as far as that goes.
I haven't got the agricultural grade to hand, I'm afraid. However, it would be a small incursion. So even if it was high quality, it'd be quite difficult to sustain an objection on that. In terms of what the land's used for, it's grazing for cattle. That's the sort of main enterprise of the occupant of the house.
So is grassland a special type of land? I have grass growing in my front garden and there's other grass in other places. Does that mean anything is appropriate grassland, or just this particular grass is a special grass?
It's just an agricultural field for grazing. That's essentially it, what the use is.
Okay, thank you. Wayne?
Yeah, thank you. Like Stephen, I was unable to make the site visit yesterday. But my first question, just so that I'm 100% clear, Mark, on page 33, I'm presuming the proposed fencing in green, that is the actual line where the fence will go. Just so that we're clear, because seems to be some confusion from the site visit yesterday, but just so that I'm clear, the fence that you showed in your presentation was the existing fence, and the cricket net, well, the perimeter for the cricket net is going to go the other side of that by about 3 meters. All right.
That's exactly correct. Yes.
Yep. So the key factor here then, what I think already Stephen and Andrew has said, is whether or not there are special circumstances to encroach in the countryside. I don't think you live in the countryside, Rochelle. That's why it wouldn't be similar to your land in Winnersh. But I think that's the key. That's our key question for this committee.
David?
Yeah, and that is, Wayne's hit the nail on the head there, because this diagram on page 33 does not define what is currently countryside. It defines what is currently the fence line, but the fence line is already an incursion into the countryside. And that is what has been very difficult to get out, why it's been so difficult to grapple with. The actual, for want of a better word, the legal boundary, that's the right description, between what is countryside and what is the residential curtilage, is somewhere on this diagram, some number of feet or yards to the north or the northwest of that existing line. So the fence line as it stands is already an incursion into countryside and does not have planning permission.
I just check with Mark then. So this would in essence be a double incursion into the countryside. Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not sure
yeah,
what
yeah,
you mean
exactly.
by double, but yeah, essentially,
Yeah.
all the lands that will be used for the pitch is lawfully agricultural, so there will be an incursion due to the development. Just to give members some direction, I would point them towards CP11 and the wording in CP11. So the wording in CP11 is it does not lead to excessive encroachment. I fully appreciate what members have said. So if what I would say is, if you make your conclusions in mind with excessive encroachment, that's sort of the threshold in CP11. And I'd also be very wary about using the term very special circumstances, because that's generally quite a loaded term with greenbelt, which we're not in the greenbelt here. So I think I've heard everything members have said, and what I would advise members is to think about their concerns in relation to whether it's excessive encroachment and the wording in CP11. Thank you.
Just one question. How far would excessive encroachment consist of then?
That's a planning judgment for the members. Obviously, you've seen the officer's report, and we don't consider it excessive encroachment, but that's a planning judgment for yourselves.
Al?
Yeah, just to ask, because CP11 was used the other month for us to not allow an architect's business because that was nothing to do with the farm it was on. But here again, I would have thought the same thing applies. I mean, this cricket pitch is nothing to do with the farm, so I would have thought CP11 would have been consistent. I mean, this is not an agricultural business.
Absolutely, you're correct. Sorry, just to clarify, Chairman. In CP11, there's sort of 7 criteria you have to go through, and generally only the first 3 apply to this scenario. So the first one is it contributes to a diverse and sustainable rural enterprise within the borough, or in the case of other countryside-based enterprise and activity, it contributes and promotes recreation and enjoyment in and of the countryside. So in the report, we think it meets that first criteria, and I think the application you were previously talking about wouldn't have met 1 probably from the sounds of it. I don't know specifically, but so I think that's the reason why there's a difference. And then it moves on to 2. Then it says, and it does not lead to excessive encroachment, and goes on. So it has to do both of those. But yeah, just to sort of clarify that there is a difference, and that's probably why the previous architect application that there was an objection based that it wasn't sort of a rural enterprise or something you would usually find in the countryside. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew, would you like to make a proposal?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a proposal, but before I do so, thank you, Mark, for elaborating some of the details of CP11. I would like to propose that this committee refuses this application and that the reason for refusal is an excessive encroachment onto designated agricultural land.
Could I make a suggestion? I don't know if I would use the word excessive. I think I would take guidance from Mark on just that wording, because if it does go to appeal, we want to be bulletproof or cricket proof.
Stephen?
I think Wayne has a very good point. It might be better to propose refusal on the grounds of encroachment on agricultural land.
So there is a proposal in favour right now. It's been seconded.
Yeah, I'd like to second that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Second that proposal.
All those in favour of refusal? Minus the excessive.
Minus the excessive.
Yes. All those in favour of the refusal? That's unanimous. The application has been refused. Item 114, application number 222-906, land south of Cutbush Lane, Chinfield.
Benjamin Hindle.
Benjamin Hindle is the officer. Would you like to give a presentation?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Brian. So this is application 222-906 to land south of Cutbush Lane. This is a full planning application for the erection of a temporary film studio backlot for outdoor filming uses as well as ancillary film set production. This is for a period of 5 years. So this slide here shows the site surroundings, and it shows, frankly, the brilliant surrounding infrastructure that development around the area has facilitated. Shown directly adjoining the proposed backlot, which is hatched on the screen in orange, we have the temporary Shinfield Studios, we have the permanent studios, Thames Valley Science Park campus, and of course the Eastern Relief Road, which links everything up. This is a very well connected location. Zooming ever so slightly, we have the overarching master plan of the Shinfield Studios. Now this shows phase 1 and phase 2, and it also includes, again, hatched at the bottom right of the screen there, the proposed backlot. Now the planning practice guidance in paragraph 32 supports the clustering of industries, and this overarching master plan with the proposed backlot hatched clearly shows that this is the clustering of the film industry, and we are currently bolstering this in the borough, and it is a good thing to be known for. To the next slide. Zooming in yet further, we have the site layout. Now the applicant was very helpful on this occasion. She has broken up the application site into 4 different segments, and I'll go through those very briefly now. First of all, we have point A, which is hatched to the top left-hand side of your screen. Now, due to the constraints on site, there is a listed building within the somewhat direct vicinity, but this creates a 100-meter buffer at the absolute least. And within this area, structures will be limited to a height of 8 meters at an absolute maximum. Point B, this is the vast majority of the site. Structures within this location on a temporary basis, they will be up to 15 meters. Now this echoes the recommendations of the general permitted development order, and a previous use on the site has been established on a temporary basis for outdoor filming. Now this echoes that requirement that we have lower structure heights where it nears serious site constraints. And of course, 15 meters is the maximum as provided within the GPDO. Point D and C. So C is the ecological buffer area. And this provides and is responsible for some of the on-site biodiversity net gain. And D, we have a dense landscape buffer. Now this consists of hedging and trees to shield views from the footpath and also to enhance the area. So this slide is about the relationship with adjoining occupiers. Now, the very positive part of this site is there aren't a great deal of adjoining occupiers other than the studios to which this use complements and Old House Farm. The nearest residential dwelling, which I've mentioned in my office report on several occasions, is 400 meters away. So there is very few site constraints in regards to neighboring amenities. So the pictures I've chosen to show you here, top of your screen to the left-hand side, we have the entrance to Old House Farm, and this is the entrance to the previously approved prior approval where outdoor filming was already taking place on the site. Now, Old House Farm, it sounds like a farm. Recently, in May 2022, we've granted or part approved a certificate of existing lawfulness for Class C on this site. So this is not an inappropriate way to access the site, as it's already formally intensified. And to the left, of course, due to the nature of the sets, as much as I'm sure everyone in this room would love to see them, we were unable to take them at the time. So we've taken a picture looking over the barrier on the edge of the previous area of prior approval. And this just shows the open countryside which this temporary use will feature on. So of course, this site is located in the countryside. This does result in a temporary loss of agricultural land. And with the newly published Joint Mineral and Waste Plan, it does have an incredibly minor incursion into the Mineral Safeguarding Area, or MSA. However, through officers working with the applicant, we have achieved 5% main studio site sustainability uplift. Now this will be provided via Section 106 to propose photovoltaics, and that will increase the Shinfield Studios sustainability on site to a quarter of all of its energy coming from renewables. Secondly, 20% biodiversity net gain, and this is on and off site. This is not a legal requirement at the moment. This is something the applicant has gone above and beyond to provide, and this will be retained for a 30-year period and managed for a 30-year period, albeit the 5-year period of temporary use we are proposing approval of. Finally, enhanced skylark mitigation to mitigate the fact that the site, as existing, was serving a skylark mating ground. This will include that suitable mitigation is considered by our ecologist and approved accordingly. With this in mind, we recommend that we grant permission subject to a 3-tiered approach. So tier 1 of this is conditions and informatives listed within Appendix 1 of the committee reports. Tier 2 of which is the completion of an associated Section 106 agreement. And we've mentioned the heads of terms in the previous slide. Finally, tier 3, subject to the Section 106 legal agreement not being completed within 6 months or an otherwise extended period of time, we request the members of the planning committee grant the head of development management the ability to refuse the application in the unlikely event that this happens. Now, before we move on, I will update you very quickly with some slight developments that we've had. So first and foremost, the applicant has kindly provided a archaeological evaluation, and this was sufficient to mitigate the need of condition 15. Now, this information was shared with Berkshire Archaeology, who are statutory consultee for archaeological matters, and they have confirmed this is sufficient to mitigate the need for condition 15. And as such, a further update will be the addition of the archaeological evaluation to the list of approved plans. And that is in regards to archaeology. So this is a very minor point. It's the amendment of the site address. Now, this has no bearing in any way whatsoever on the ownership, the red line, the site area. This stays exactly the same. This is simply a formality. And this is proposed to be changed to land south of Old House Farm. Final update here is the amendment to the consultation table. Again, a very minor suggestion here, and this is amending the Environment Agency response from no comments as it currently reads to no objection, subject to conditions, condition of which is condition 14, which has been appended within Appendix 1 of my committee reports. Thank you very much for listening.
Nick Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Nick Patterson-Neild, Planning Director with Barton Wilmore, now Stantec, representing Shinfield Studios, speaking in support of the application tonight. As you've heard from the case officer, the proposal seeks full planning permission for a 5-year temporary period for an outdoor filming backlot with associated facilities on land south of Old House Farm. It is, of course, as you heard, adjacent to the existing studios, and it follows the successful use of part of the land under permitted development through the latter part of 2022 and the early part of this year. No representations have been received from residents in relation to this application, and there are no objections from consultees. The backlot facility is an essential part of a successful film studio. It provides land essentially for the creation of temporary external film sets, usually in place only for a few weeks at a time, and that enables the filming of outdoor scenes in support of the productions which use the sound stages in the main studio. The proposal, as you've heard, has landscaping around the margins to mitigate and minimise any visual impact, and is, as you've also heard, supported by a proposed Section 106 agreement. And that enables further renewable energy provision on the main site, as Mr. Hindle's outlined, a 5% uplift, and accompanied also by a 20% biodiversity net gain in excess of the council's requirements. As members will be aware, Shinfield Studio continues to provide a unique and an exciting opportunity for Wokingham Borough, in which it will bring and is already bringing substantial economic benefits, not only meeting a pressing demand for film studio space production, but also supports the growth of the sector within the wider UK. The studios now is probably the fourth largest film studio in the UK. And that's a very important benefit to the local community and the economy as a whole. In a broader terms, it also supports the University of Reading's ambitions for this expansion of Thames Valley Science Park, with its focus on the creative industries and what is emerging as a creative cluster. And so that's all I have to say this evening, but I hope members will support the recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Benjamin and Nick, for your presentations. I note that circa 50% of the site already has extant prior permission for the proposed use, and that there have been no comments from the public, parish council, or local members. I believe that this application has quite a number of merits, many of which have been outlined this evening: environmental and also economic merits. I don't have any issues with this application, including its layout, design, and landscaping. I am inclined to support the officer recommendation for approval.
David?
Thank you, Chair. I would echo Andrew's comments. I think this is generally a good application. But I'm interested in condition 4, temporary use, which says that no later than 5 years from the date of permission issued, with the land reverting back to its existing agricultural use immediately after this period. I can understand that means that the land will be reclassified as agricultural, or its agricultural classification will be maintained. But what actually does it mean in practice? Is there any restoration plan in place, or is it just going to be left as sort of derelict land?
Yes, so yes, remediation is very standard, and this is quite a standard condition for temporary uses. It would be one thing to, of course, revert naturally back to the agricultural use, but some work does have to happen on the ground, whether this be seeding, whether this be removing the granular surface that is proposed to have the sets features on it. Remediation will be required, and has been agreed by the applicant.
Thank you. Very little to add. Prior approval on much of the site, it's an important consideration. Clearly, the environmental benefits are an important consideration also. But what I think really clinches it for me is that this application supports the creative industries in this vicinity. This is really important, I think, for the borough. These creative industries are going to make a big contribution to the local economy. There are some downsides, the loss of agricultural land, countryside, a small incursion, a very small incursion into land identified in the Minerals and Waste Local Plan. But I think those harms, if we can put it that way, are very considerably outweighed by the benefits. So I would support the application.
I also see the idea that there will be more jobs available for Woking people, and the fact that Woking will be out in the world as a creative area. We are the Hollywood of the UK now. I think this is a really good idea from that standpoint. Jobs and positive things about Woking, and I will be supporting it as well. Wayne?
Yeah, echo what you've said about being positive, economic, and et cetera, and it's good for Wokingham. But can I just pick up on David's point? Can we make sure we're absolutely bulletproof on this condition? Because the not smart motorway depot is still looking like a bomb site, and that should have gone back to agricultural land. So I think David makes a great point. Or unless they might need it when they revert it back to a normal motorway.
Would someone like to make a proposal now?
Seem to be agreed.
Anyone? Andrew?
Yes, I would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and conditions.
All those in favor? Subject to the
Conditions.
additions in the supplementary agenda as well. That's been, yes, we need to vote again. Sorry. Rebecca, are you voting? Thank you. That's passed unanimously.
Two, 8, 5. Church name, Marcus Watts.
Okay, the next application is application number 222-805 High Barn Church Lane, Finch Hempstead.
Marcus Watts.
And Marcus is the,
officer's just setting up.
okay. Marcus will be setting up. He'll be on there online in just a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening all. This is application number 222805 for the proposed change of use of an agricultural paddock and part of a private woodland to commercial land to be used for the provision of dog walking services at High Barn in Finch Hempstead. This is a retrospective application. These services are currently carried out by Paws for Walking between 10:30 and 2:30 Mondays to Thursdays only, with a maximum of 20 dogs per session and 2 to 3 staff members supervising. There's a small mobile shed on the paddock which is used to store equipment relating to the services, but apart from that, there's no other form of operational development on the site. Safety concerns relating to the activities are not a material planning consideration. However, the applicant has advised that staff members are fully licensed and the services are covered by liability insurance. So what happens is that all dogs are collected on the way to the site by staff by appointment only in a van, with no dogs dropped off or collected from the site. The site is accessed via the entrance to the Finch Hempstead Sports Club off the village, which is here, where my mouse is wiggling. With the van then driving up through the car park of the sports club to an existing parking area, which is sort of situated around here, and where the dogs are then walked through this private woodland here, crossing over onto a public footpath, and then into the agricultural paddocks, where then they then go and walk, play, etc. in this paddock only. When the session is done, they then make their way back over the footpath, through the woodland, and then into the van, and then driven off. So this is the access point to the application site via Finch Hampstead Sports Club off the village. And then this is the area where the van parks before the dogs are escorted through this existing set of gates here into the private woodland. The dogs are leashed at all times during the transfer. This is a view on the left here. This is a view of the application site from the southwest. To the right is the footpath through the private woodland with views of the paddock to the north. So this patch of this grassland over here. Rectory Farm is adjacent to the west here. And you can also see in the distance the gate entry system where the dogs cross the footpath. So the footpath bends over like this, and the dogs cross over from here to here before going into the paddock. And then this is a view of the agricultural paddocks to the northeast. The mobile shed is visible in the distance. You can see it here. And this paddock is where the activities are carried out. The mature trees adjacent to the southern boundary are also visible, and these largely block views of the activity from the public footpath running behind. To conclude, these services are a low-key activity which is appropriate within the countryside and is a sustainable rural enterprise. The change of use of the land has an acceptable impact on the character and appearance of the area, and does not cause any significant harm to the amenity of neighbouring land users. There are no concerns relating to other material planning considerations, including trees and highway safety. This application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and informatives listed in Appendix 1.
Okay, Brian Bidston, resident.
Good evening. My name is Brian Bidston. I own Rectory Farm, and so we have a long boundary with both the woodland and the paddock in which these dogs are exercised. They refer to this as dog walking, a field used for dog walking. Most dog fields in the UK are used for dog walking, and that means that local people can go into the fields with their dog. Normally, it's limited to 6 dogs or 5 dogs in the field at any one time, and for any one owner to have a maximum of 3 dogs. This is not dog walking. What they're doing is they're collecting dogs from outside the borough, mainly Camberley, I believe. They're loading them into lorries. They're then coming through the Memorial car park and unloading them next to a sports field that is used by both adults and minors. They're then, they say, they're herded through the woodland, and then they have to cross a footpath, which means the footpath is blocked. And there's 3 vans currently. I've counted 27 dogs. And my main concern, honestly, is the safety of people working on the farm, and both people in the sports field and people walking the footpaths. Now, there is an organisation called British Dog Fields, and I looked at their recommendations, and one of the big differences with a normal dog field and what's proposed is that you end up with up to 27 dogs in the field with 3 handlers. That is inherently dangerous. I don't think it's wise to do it in any location, quite frankly, and there has been, as you know, recent deaths for dog handlers when you've got large numbers of dogs. So I'm concerned with it's very important that it is safely enclosed. They first put an application in 2021, and they proposed a 1.5 metre mesh fence. The reason for mesh is much more solid. So it's not small mesh, it's large mesh, but it's solid. So they recognised the need to replace the existing fencing. They then withdrew that application. This has been going on for 4 years now. They withdrew their application for reasons I don't know. And nearly 2 years later, they put in another application. And the plans that they put forward prior to the consultation had reduced the size of this fence to 1.2 metres, still dog mesh. What then happened is that after the consultation period, they sent revised plans where they've actually said, look, we're not going to put any new fencing up. We think the existing agricultural fencing is suitable.
Could you please sum up?
Sorry?
Could you please sum up? Your time is up.
A few minutes went quickly. What I'm summing up is that I object to this because I think it is dangerous. And if it is allowed, it should be a condition that you have either 1.5 or 1.8 metre fencing as recommended by the British Dogfields Organisation.
Thank you. Rebecca or David, do you wish to? Sorry. David, the agent?
Take it then. Right. Okay, thank you. Good evening and thank you, Chair and members. Tonight, I'm not going to talk about policy because that's been clearly covered and accurately dealt with by the officer and his report to committee, and the conclusions are recommendation, which we naturally support. So I would like to concentrate on the activity itself and the objections raised. And you can all view the plan that's on the screen now. And as the objector who just spoke wanted to talk about the access of the dogs, etc., I would clearly like to point out the reality of the situation. The dogs arrive in a van to the owner's land. There is no access to that bit of land from the sports field or any connection or interaction with anybody from that sports field. The van is parked next to a holding pen. The dogs are moved into the holding pen, and then the van is locked up. The person then opens the back gate and goes into the private woodland, again owned by the applicant, and has total access through to the footpath. When it reaches the footpath, again, the applicant has been very considerate here. He has put 2 gates either side of the footpath. So a few metres stretch of the footpath is boarded off with the two gates, whilst the dogs are moved into yet another holding pen, again on the applicant's land. From the holding pen, they then cross the field, which is the applicant's land, to the middle field where they are cared for with the dog walkers. So at no time during this process is there any public interaction. So what I'd like to mention here is that there's 2 main concerns that I've noticed in objections that people speak about, which is noise and of course dogs bark, but the danger of attacks, etc., which I think we've covered by the fact that there's no public interaction. What I'm concerned about is that in terms of dog walking services, etc., is this being confused with some of the other dogs that walk along the footpath? Whilst I was there, I monitored the footpath for a number of hours. There was 18 dogs. 16 of them were off the lead, 2 were on the lead. Some were barking, some were out of control. But this is normal practice. It didn't concern me. Now, the owner himself of all this land has the public and dogs walking onto his private areas, and he has no complaints. So what I'm concerned about here, if people talking about stopping an activity like this, is what happens to the rights of the other community and the public who want to walk their dogs? Are their rights being threatened in this way? We have to consider the needs of the community, not just to be able to walk their dogs, to provide services to assist the economics and their family convenience. We're a nation of dog lovers. We have 11 million dogs in the UK, and people need to work, they need to go to school, they need to go to hospital, they have holidays, etc. The necessity for a service such as this is very important. The livelihood and general well-being of the general or wider community, I'm sure you agree, needs to be considered. As I stated at the beginning, the officers have dealt with a policy which we support and hope you do too. I hope we have shown that the dog walking activity is primarily restricted to the private land with no public interaction, and therefore safety is important and has been dealt with in this manner, and it will benefit the general community. But to conclude, and most importantly, as the members I'm sure will be aware, there are 2 elements to this use. Number 1,
could you please sum up?
Yes, I will now. Number one is planning, and it's sound in this respect as the officer has written his report. Number two is dog licensing and is independent of tonight, which covers the concerns of any objectors, etc. The dog licensing board have enhanced their considerably over the last few years on their standards. The regulations, safety procedures and general practices need to be considered here, and that's done by your environmental team. And this tonight is a planning issue. So the members of the public.
Okay, would you please stop now? Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
A very quick 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. My original comments and concerns for this were based upon the perception of hours of operation. And I'm glad to see in one of the conditions that the hours of operation are limited, I believe, to from 10 until 2.
So, yeah, so the hours are conditioned from 10:30 in the morning to 2:30 in the afternoon, Mondays to Thursdays only. So that's how they're currently operating. And so there'll be no further extension to those hours.
Thank you. I have a couple of other comments, though, which are still a bit of a concern. The first is a new one. When I look at the plans that I've seen for the first time since getting this report, if I'm understanding the plans correctly, you're referring to the access from point 1 to point 2 to point 3 as a right of way. It is not a right of way. It's land owned, I think, by the parish council, but leased to the Memorial Hall playing fields. And although I think they've given their permission for the business operating to cross that land, it is most definitely not a public right of way.
Yeah, so just to clarify, that is a private right of way. From my understanding from speaking with the applicant, is that this is a private right of way that they have over the car park. And then when you get to the rear, that is then their land to the north of the buildings. That's then their own land ownership. When this application came in, we checked land registry, and that was our understanding from looking at that as well.
I understand the fact that you may have a private arrangement to permit passage across the land, but I've never heard the phrase private right of way used. I mean,
that's probably not the right phrase, but that's not my area of expertise. But they had to say that regardless, that's separate from the planning application. So if the Finchampstead Sports Club do own that land and then they revoke access and stop the van from going over, then that sits outside of planning.
That is a commercial matter between the applicant and the parish council. I just want to make quite clear it's not a public right of way. And similarly, do I understand correctly that the condition, when it is the condition there relating to parking of vehicles, or condition 3, parking and turning space to be provided, is that parking and turning space on the applicant's land, or is that in the car park for the village, for the sports ground?
It's the applicant's land. I'll just get up that plan again that I just had shared, because that sort of explains it. Yeah, that was the one. So the parking, that yellow strip is the land that the applicant doesn't own but has a right of way over. Then when you get private access, and then when you come to this point here where it's then green hatched, that's the applicant's own land that he owns. And the cars park, you can't really see it, but there's a no, that's all. So in this sort of area where my mouse is, they park here, and that's an existing area where they park. The conditions worded like that, that's the standard. So that just basically means that if consent was to be granted, then they have to park in that area which they have shown as parking. So in short, vehicles associated with that business would only park there, and that's just what that condition means. It just secures that.
Thank you for that. So my two other questions, one is a new one from what I've heard this evening. As I said at the start, I come to this with an open mind. I hadn't considered the issue of the safety fencing. I'm quite concerned by what the gentleman from the Rectory Farm mentioned in terms of the height of the fencing for what is regarded as something that's safe, because those footpaths alongside that pallet, which the the access to the site crosses are some of the most well used in the whole of Finch Hampstead parish. I'm walking fairly frequently myself. And I know very many others do. Indeed, the agent mentioned this in terms of people walking their own dogs there. So the thought that a dog couldn't jump a metre-high fence alarms me somewhat. I think that I'd like some reassurances about what a safe height of fence would be. But my other point, which stood originally, was that this again is change of use from agricultural paddock to commercial land. And in my naivety, because I'm not really great on agricultural practices, we've got one set of four-legged animals running around in the field and now another set of four-legged animals running around in the field. Does it actually need to have a change of use to commercial land, or can this not be sort of retained under agricultural land?
So on the first point about the fencing, that sort of falls under the environmental protection laws and is not really a planning consideration. In paragraph 16 of the committee report, I sort of talk about the fencing and why we didn't think it was appropriate to have higher fencing in this location because of the impact on the character of the area. You wouldn't expect a public footpath to have between, say, 1.5, 1.8 metre high fences in a rural location. So it was because of the impact of the character of the area and also the safety issues falling outside of planning why we thought that it wasn't appropriate to secure higher fencing in this instance. The second one point about the change of use, yeah, it's sort of more of it's sort of like the technical description of the change of use, because in this instance, yes, it's technically a commercial business just by its nature, but it wouldn't because of the scale of the proposal, it's not really, it is changing the use of the land technically, but because of the low scale nature of the business, if it was then to cease, then it would just revert back to agriculture. So under planning, under the use classes, you can just revert back to agriculture without needing planning permission. And because there's no operational development except for the mobile shed, it's sorry, long story short, it's like sort of a technical description, but I would agree with you that it's not really a commercial use of the land, just a commercial business using that land. Maybe that's a better way to think about it.
I mean, and I'm sure a number of residents are deeply concerned about the fact that the change of use is material, because whatever we say here, if we say it's commercial land, in the future it's commercial land. I think we could be greatly reassured if you could capture what you've just said in a condition that says at the point where this business ceases to operate, it reverts to agricultural land.
I just jump in, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Cornish. There's a couple of points there worth clarifying. So when we are discussing and considering commercial uses, there are various types of commercial uses. Agriculture is a commercial use. You are growing food for profit for whatever reason. There's no difference. The countryside is used in many different ways. This is a change of use from agricultural land because it's no longer agriculture. Almost consider agricultural land as the default. Okay, so anything that's not agriculture, and that could be the keeping of horses, that could be all sorts of different things which are agricultural activities or we associate with rural areas, but they are not agriculture. This is another example of a sustainable rural enterprise according to policy. It's compatible with an area of significant open space, which is only really found in rural areas. That's why we experience a lot of dog walkers joining the site, because that tends to be where people walk dogs if they have access to the countryside. In terms of the change of use and the status of the application, it requires planning permission to change from agriculture, as does most uses. When it ceases, the land doesn't become commercial of any sort unless another dog walking business was to immediately start after this business ceased. So the use of the land is changed. But wider commercial uses, which are not dog walking, would require planning permission in their own right, along with any operational development in the future. So the planning system itself is the mechanism to prevent further hypothetical uses in the future. The same with any area of land that moves to a non-agricultural use.
Thank you. Whilst these aren't planning considerations, I do have concerns, even though it's written here from the environmental health that they reviewed the application, but about the number of dogs. However, this is something that could be looked at in conditions that is purely stipulated here. You know, there's 27 dogs. We all know, we've seen the news. We know what recently happened. And there are restrictions on the amount of dogs that can be walked by a person at a time. So I would like some reassurance regarding this, of whether this could be something to do with the license for this actual business. Maybe you can give me some clarification. Also, the fencing around it is, you know, from the pictures and from what I know of the area, dogs can easily get under that kind of fencing. You know, the maintenance of that fencing and escape out, and there are other paddocks around it. There could potentially be other animals. I know these are not material planning considerations, but I wonder if it could be something that could be looked at in conditions within this application.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's worth, as you rightly acknowledge, what are not material planning considerations. In this regard, the planning system and this planning application is responsible for considering the proposed use of land. In terms of other legislation, dog walking licenses, etc., other requirements that fall outside of planning, we would not be able to insist upon or separately regulate that through this planning application, because it would be a duplication, and ultimately separate licensing would take precedent to a condition on a planning application. Regardless of whether this permission was here, a dog walker walking dogs anywhere on public land, in a local park, in the centre of a city, would have to adhere to dog walking legislation. It would not be the remit of the planning system or this committee to insist upon that. The second point was the fencing. Again, my colleague Marcus has helpfully identified the fact that public rights of way are designed for horses, dogs, pedestrians, cyclists, and to insist upon infrastructure, means of enclosure for one particular user on a perimeter of land, for example, adjoining a footpath, not only possibly sets precedent that even in residential gardens, people have dogs. It is up to an individual whether they feel it's necessary to have higher fencing if it's a safety issue, but again, not for us necessarily to base that requirement on the use of the land without that technical understanding of what is safe or not safe. The amount of dogs, likewise, on the site, it is not something we can control or monitor. Same way we can't monitor the amount of people living in a residential property. We can only deal with the use of land, not the numbers within that use, to a certain degree.
Stephen?
Thank you. Obviously, there are a lot of concerns about this application, and most of them, I think, actually really relate to safety. Our problem as a planning committee is that these safety issues are, for the most part, outside our remit. They're part of the licensing process, so we have to accept that, I'm afraid. On planning, in planning terms, it's also worth adding, of course, as David recognised, the issue of access, the right of way is a civil matter. It's again not something within the control of this committee. So we have to focus really on the planning aspects of this. And the one that I would just like to explore a little bit further, if I may, it relates to the point again David made about the change of use. Now, I may have misunderstood this, so please forgive me if I have, but I think Brian was saying that this is an agricultural related, or it's something that's compatible with a countryside location. So therefore, although it's a commercial activity in the countryside, it's not commercial use. I think that's the way we were trying to explain this. One of the slight concerns I have is that if we use any wording like a use compatible with the countryside or an agricultural related use, it could open up this land to all sorts of other activity on a commercial basis that this has established some kind of precedent for. I think you were suggesting it would only establish a precedent for dog walking or dog related activities like this. And if that's the case, if you can kind of reassure me that that's the case, then I'd feel a bit more comfortable.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I mean, the description of development specifically relates to the use for the provision of dog walking services. It is not its own use class. So therefore, the land benefit, yeah, that's.
So the assumption is just as if you had an extension to your house, granted planning permission, that doesn't give you planning permission to knock down that extension and build another very much bigger one or something. It's not a very good comparison, but essentially this is an application related to a specific use which you're recommending we grant permission for on that basis alone. Yeah, okay. That I think I can understand and accept.
I also have a dog and I have a back garden and I have 8-foot fences or 6-foot fences in the back at least, because I like to keep my dog in my garden, not necessarily in my neighbor's garden or my other neighbor's garden. But that's my own personal opinion. That's not a requirement for this particular thing. I walk my own dog by myself as well. These are obviously commercial services, and it is a commercial service being provided on agricultural land. That's the only thing I can say. I can't say that's actually commercial, changing it to commercial use, but it is a commercial service. They're not doing it for free, and they're not doing it. They're doing it for a profit. David?
Due respect, I don't think the planning system forbids that.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, I have a lot of sympathy with the applicant. I mean, I don't see any great problem with him trying to put his business together. We should be encouraging people to run commercial enterprises in the countryside. So, you know, this is not about being hostile to someone running a business, but I think it is taking into account the genuine concerns of residents. And I come back, I'm afraid, Brian, to the point about setting precedents with commercial land. I am aware of an application that was approved in Finchampstead Parish. Indeed, the plot may come again for further development, when it was challenged by the parish council as being a greenfield site. We were told it's not a greenfield site. There's a shed in it. It's a brownfield site, and therefore it's redevelopment of brownfield land. And if I need to dig out the case history on that, I certainly can do. I'm not pretending for a minute this is the case here, but I think that we were greatly reassured by the previous application where there was a time expiry on the temporary permission for the film parking lot. If this is about a dog walking business, I can't see why a condition couldn't be attached that should that dog walking business give up the use of that property, it is the permission for running a business already expires with it. I mean, you guys know the words better than I do, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
Wayne?
Yeah, so you've obviously been dealing with this for quite some time, Marcus, as it's retrospective and you've been on site. Just so that I'm clear, what is the significance of the way that the paddocks have been described as 1, 2, 3, and 4? Is that all in the ownership of the applicant, or is that been set out and structured in that way because other activities happen in those 4 paddocks?
So all 4 paddocks fall within the applicant's ownership. They're a set of paddocks. It's just a historic layout of that piece of land where it used to be sheep grazing. So yeah, the fences are just pre-existing and they were just dividing them up into 1, 2, 3, 4. But that there's no significance to except for the fact that they're only the services are only carried out in one of those paddocks.
And also, I can't find where the extent, the conservation area related to the church, how far does that extend? How close is that to this site?
It's about what I'll do is I'll get it up on our mapping, but I believe it's around 40 to 50 meters, something like that.
Is that all?
I'll just get it up. No, 400, 500.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I'll just get it up. I can confirm that now for you.
It's a grade 1 listed church, isn't it?
I believe it's.
It's obviously raised by one of the neighbours.
Yeah, so it's a grade 1 listed church. Let me just get it up now.
Just as a point of information, assuming my fingers are correct, the distance from the middle of that field to the church building is given to me here as 239 yards.
I'm just got it up now so we can do a measurement. So this is just loading, but this purple outline is the conservation area, and then the one within it is the listed church. If I do, it's not an exact science, but if I can do a measure from, say, here. No, sorry, my laptop's not playing. Cool.
Sorry, it's not in the house.
No, it falls outside. Oh yeah, sorry. It says in paragraph 35 of the report it's approximately 70 meters. That's from the top of the boundary here to here. But reason I go in to explain that in that point is because of the minimal impact on the overall character of the area and the nature of the activity. There wasn't any reason to consider that there would be a specific impact on those heritage assets.
I think one thing, and I'll build on Stephen and David's point. These are springing up all over the borough. And there's more, because I've had conversations with Jason Varley about sites where these are happening. So we have to be very careful in our conditions on this site if we're minded to approve it. Because, you know, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute you have a mobile hut and it becomes a brownfield site, but it becomes a constant problem for enforcement, because sites like this go unnoticed because they're hidden away and then the clock ticks. And that's where the problem is occurring. And most of the sites that I know of, because this has become a big business since the pandemic, it's everywhere. And you know, I know the licenses have also got their own particular issues, how they control it. So, but that's a separate issue. But I do think we need to be very tight on our conditions, because this is going to cause the borough a problem.
Stephen?
Thank you. Can I just, I think that was a very good point. I think we do need to be very precise about the conditions, although we do also need to accept that this is a planning application that we have to deal with as a planning application as it appears before us. But could I ask a question about the licensing authority? Is the licensing authority Wokingham Borough Council?
Yes, I've spoken with colleagues in the licensing team and they're aware of this business.
Okay, thank you. I wonder, in view of the fact that the planning authority is Wokingham Borough Council and the licensing authority is Wokingham Borough Council, and in the hopes that it's possible that we could link the two together, could we add an informative to the list of conditions expressing the concerns of the committee about the need to ensure safety? The safety concerns of local residents are properly addressed in the assessment of the licence.
Yes, we could add an informative at the end, pointing them to the correct legislation and raising some concerns raised.
And the dogs as well.
Sorry?
And the dogs as well. Having that many dogs in one area, it'd be, make sure there's enough people there to make sure the dogs are safe.
That would likely fall within the licensing requirements. So as long as they're adhering to that and any others, I would kind of urge not to specify any particular parts that we are not sure about.
Okay, Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think there's been very thorough and very useful discussion, on this application. I do still have one question, okay, on a matter that I'm still not absolutely clear on in my own mind, and that is very simply, if this application is approved, is the approval restricted solely for the use of dog walking? And if so, would there be any need to condition such if the application is restricted solely for the use of dog walking?
Yes, so the description of the application restricts the development to the provision of dog walking services only. Because of that, I wouldn't repeat that within a condition because it's already in the description of the application. I think just to clarify even further, because of the condition we have on hours, this application means that it only approves the provision of dog walking services for 16 hours per week, Monday through Thursday. So it's really clear what can happen and when it can happen.
Is there a proposal? For or against this application? Stephen?
I think in the circumstances, given that we've debated this very thoroughly and we've realised, I think, that we have to confine ourselves to the planning aspects of this application. We can't delve into other areas that we don't have any authority over. I would propose that we accept the officer recommendation and all the conditions attached and the additional informative that I mentioned earlier on.
Is there a second? Andrew? All those in favor? All those opposed or abstained? That the application is passed. The next application is 221797 Crockers.
Okay, Benjamin Hingle.
Benjamin Hingle is going to be speaking first, and then the board council will speak second.
Just setting up.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will share my screen ever so quickly for you. Marvelous. Excellent. So this is application 221797, and this is to Crockers Rushy Way in Early. This is an outline application with all matters reserved for the proposed erection of 9 dwellings following the demolition of the existing single dwelling. So the overall site plan here identifies the main focus of this application. This is located in a major development location where development in general, subject to material considerations, of course, is prescribed as acceptable. Let's zoom this in ever so slightly. This shows the fact that the application borders Rushy Way. Adjacent to the application site is Tiptree Close, and adjoining is Beauchief Close and Catcliffe Way. So I think it's important to set the overall parameters of what we are approving today, what we are considering today. And the fact is, this is an outline application with all matters reserved, and therefore it must be treated and respected as such. Therefore, the primary focus of what we are considering and approving today, or recommending for approval, shall I say, my apologies, is the principle of development, again, in this major development location. Furthermore, as the application is an outline and the agent/applicant does not specify specifically that the application access is for illustrative purposes only, the broad location of access can be considered on this application. But to get things absolutely clear, this is not approving details of the width, the length, the visibility displays, etc. This is all going to be considered at related reserve matter stage because the access matter is reserved. So as such, almost done with the reserve matter section. It's the access, layout, scale, external appearance, and landscaping that will be considered as subsequent application. This cannot be hang on here. moving swiftly onwards. So this is the existing elevations of the single dwelling. It's a very large family home currently, unfortunately in a state of disrepair. So to the top of your screens, you will see the front existing elevation, and to the bottom, you will see the existing rear/side elevation on what is a very large plot in a major development location. And the access is a point of contention here, a point we must dwell on to an extent. And these images here show the existing access, internal views to the north of your screen, and external views to the south of your screen with views from Rushy Way. Now, the location of this access broadly is staying in exactly the same location, and the highways officer, upon his review, supports the idea of this access in this location. However, this is the broad principle of this location. Again, I reiterate, this is not the width, the length. This, the safety aspects of this visibility displays, this is all going to inform the reserved matter stage, which is standard procedure with outline applications. Now, I've included these aerial 3D images because I think it really sets the scene, shall we say, quite nicely. This application site is a real anomaly in a major development location. If we look at the cluster development behind in Bowchief Close, if we look at the relationships where my cursor is now between the back to flank, this very much is owed to its major development location. An indicative site plan has been provided, and officers to an extent have considered this, as if the application came through at reserved matter stage to this extent, what impacts would that have? However, the simple fact is this could be subject to change, this could be subject to alteration, as all matters are reserved. As such, conditional approval is recommended, as we have to apply the tilted balance. We can only display a 3.95-year housing land supply, and therefore it is very material to consider the fact that this is 9 new dwellings in a major development location, a net increase of 8 dwellings, and this significantly weighs on the planning balance. And as such, this outweighs the very minor impacts, speculative impacts of that. And therefore it's recommended for conditional approval as set out within Appendix 1 of the committee report. Now, before we press on, we do have some updates with this one also. So firstly, paragraph 55, a little bit of clarity. Unfortunately, this was just a little bit of a typo. Now, we were talking about dwellings per hectare, we were talking about density. And this paragraph stated that the surrounding density was 27 to 27, which is indeed not the case. This should read 27 to 47. Now, considering the application is 33.9, that fits quite nicely. Next, I provided further detail on what we've just discussed at the start of this presentation. So the level of access approved. The broad location, the fact that matters are reserved, the access matter is still reserved, regardless of the determination. The unit numbers also, officers have considered and are considering and presenting in front of the planning committee 9 dwellings. And finally, a little bit further provided as to the level of landscape loss on site. So again, as these layouts are purely indicative, they can be subject to change. The appearance has not been confirmed. The locations of the dwellings has not been confirmed, and therefore minimal weight at this stage should be placed on the loss of these figures until we have further clarity at a later stage. Thank you very much for listening.
Andrew Shaw,
I can share that.
you have a PowerPoint presentation?
Can I share it? Yeah, I get it.
No, I don't think, did I press the right one? Yep, perfect. Sorry, who's doing the present PowerPoint? You are. Perfect. Okay.
Just wait until the presentation is ready.
Perfect. Evening, everyone. We, the local residents, object to this outline application for a number of reasons, but primarily that the change from 1 dwelling to 9 dwellings is an overdevelopment of the site. We realise that the plan is indicative, but it fails to satisfy a number of concerns raised by Wokingham Borough Council, many neighbours, and should be rejected. Access. The current plan fails to show how 9 dwellings can be accommodated satisfactorily in failing to demonstrate that a suitable and safe access can be achieved. Wokingham Borough Council's Highways team in August 22 commented that under manual for streets, a 30-metre junction spacing between junctions is needed, but that this has not been addressed. Slide 2, please. Tiptree Close opposite is a key entrance to Hillside Primary School for children and parents and is in constant use. Environmental. The proposals contravene Woking Borough Council's Climate Emergency Action Plan by not engaging with the local community and stakeholders. Policy CP3, CC03, TB21 and TB06 requiring development proposals to protect and retain existing trees, hedges and other landscape features. Furthermore, development proposals which would result in the loss, fragmentation or isolation of areas of green infrastructure will not be accessible. This will also lead to the development and loss of private residential gardens. The development will result in the loss of gardens with little provision of replacement of soft or green landscaping. Next slide, please. The TPO of 2022, which applies to the site, requires that 7 trees and an important group of trees should be preserved. However, no protection exists for the essential current screening mature hedgerows. The plan demonstrates removal of protected trees already for plot 2 and 5. TPO 123 cannot currently be effectively protected from damage from driveway construction work. The current hedgerow around the property provides habitat, shelter, corridors, rest spaces and safety for a wide range of animals and birds, as well as an essential screening to neighbours and helps with soil retention and water management. This needs to be retained and protected. Biodiversity. Next slide, please. The committee report concludes a net gain from the proposal. This is absurd and greenwashing, given the loss of trees, disruption, noise, stripping of topsoil, excavation, and so on. Wildlife will not return for many years. Design, layout and privacy. At present, 14 neighbouring properties enjoy quiet back gardens bordering the site with only 1 house. The increased disturbance from demolition and building of 9 new dwellings in a relatively small area would lead to an unacceptable intrusion and disturbance in the form of noise nuisance, general disturbance, cooking odours and so on, as well as light pollution. Unreasonable overshadowing due to the elevation would also occur.
Could you please sum up very quickly now?
Yep, of course. The proposal from 1 flat roof to 9 dwellings of up to 3 stories with the loss of trees, green space, wildlife will radically alter the enjoyment and appearance of the area. We invite the committee, next slide please. We invite the committee for a site visit so that we can demonstrate the reality of what we are facing before any decision is made. Thank you for your time.
And Daniel Thompson, the agent, please.
Good evening, Daniel Thompson, Chartered Architect and agent for the applicant, obviously in support for this. We had a fantastic introduction to this from the planning officer. And I just want to build upon those points because it is an outline application. A lot of the matters raised during the application were matters for reserved application, therefore not for consideration at the outline stage. Highways initially objected. They have since revised our scheme. We've provided additional detailing, and that has now led for that objection to be withdrawn with suitable conditions placed, subject to a reserved matters application. So we have addressed those concerns. So yes, there was a concerns initially, and working with the planning department and attempts with the local ward members, we've addressed those points. The density of the development, as stated, is within the threshold of the surrounding development. It's actually on the lower end of that scale. It is a lower density development than the surrounding area. So arguments of overdevelopment fall short when we compare it to the surrounding context. The design has not been prepared. We suggest 3-storey. A lot of the objectors said 3-storey does not exist in the area. Many of those objectors themselves lived in a 3-storey dwelling. And we can see those examples from a street view. Could we ask for silence, please? Landscaping is a reserved matter also. To allow validation, we had to justify the high grade trees on the site. And we did a tree survey that identified grade B trees. There are no grade A trees, and therefore the focus of the landscaping only focused on those landscaping elements required for this outline application. Any removed grade B tree is proposed to be replaced with 2 good quality trees with a suitable management plan to ensure their survival during the development. All other landscaping, including that fantastic hedgerow bordering the site, which is not been stated whether to be retained or not. The presumption that we could probably extrapolate from that is it is well established. This is a very good screen for that development, which protects the amenity that was so lovingly mentioned a moment ago. It is likely to be retained, but it is not a matter for this outline application. We was only focusing on the landscaping we were asked to focus on because of their importance. And we have those TPOs. And again, we've taken the measures to provide a biodiversity net gain in any harm caused by them at this outline stage. I want to reiterate the comments. This is an outline application. A lot of the matters, in fact, all of the matters are reserved. The access is existing. It was there first. If we're using the design guidance, did Tiptree follow them? No, it came before they came into effect. But the access to Crockers was there in the first instance. Everything developed around it, and therefore it is the presiding access. And therefore, as highways have said, in principle, and we are assessing the principle, it is suitable for development subject to details that prove this at a reserved matters stage. We are only establishing the principle tonight. We are not delving into the details that show the feasibility of it. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Pauline, I believe you have the first minute and a half. Which one?
Ask them to both to bring chairs up.
Bring the chair, bring both of your chairs up. It's easier probably.
Right, we're gonna.
You have a minute and a half each,
Yes.
so, sorry.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, we're both ward members which cover this site. So quickly, whilst I welcome the reduction of the proposed houses from 10 to 9, I have serious concerns that developments cannot accommodate this area level of development. I recognise this is an outline development, but I have serious concerns that when it moves to full application, the proposed number of dwellings, which is a subject to this application, will be an issue. The planned access doesn't meet highway standards and hasn't changed, being almost directly opposite the access to Tiptree Close rather with the required 30-metre offset. It also appears to be very narrow with no pavement, and I can't see how cars will pass or refuse lorries access. Whilst access is a reserved matter, the landscape officer has raised concerns regarding the loss of TPO trees, such as T005, when the access is widened, which will have to be from a drive serving 1 dwelling to one serving 9 houses with a significantly higher level of traffic. The area has significant issues with inconsiderate parking and speeding already due to the proximity of Hillside Primary School. It would not be necessary to remove this tree if the proposed numbers of dwellings was further reduced to provide more space to access the site. The site is cramped, doesn't provide a public open space, leaving residents with an unattractive, largely hard-standing frontage. 3 of the gardens, plots 9, 1 and 6, do not meet the required standards, and I don't see how a longer garden on one plot can mitigate another plot having a short garden. The space and length standards are there for a reason, and it's no consolation to the resident.
You've got 12 more seconds.
With the inadequate length plot, or the people they overlook that someone elsewhere in the development has got a longer garden. It's essentially existing hedging is retained. I'm very concerned about the existing 2-storey houses in Boachheath are not subject
Your
to
time's up, I'm afraid.
from the area which is hard. Can I finish?
Thank you. No, your time is up.
With so much hard landscaping. So in summary, 9 houses too many.
Caroline?
Okay. Thank you. I would like to start by asking the planning committee to undertake a site visit at 3 to 3:30. This timing is important to understand the many issues regarding the traffic at school closing time. One of the major issues regarding this development is the junction from Crockers that is opposite an existing busy junction, Tiptree and Rushy Way. Rushy Way itself is an extremely busy road that includes a main bus route. Recently, WBC had to make a permanent traffic calming measure at this part of the road, immediately outside Hillside School. If this was a new estate was coming to planning, this design, effectively making a crossroads with no refuge on a busy road, would not be acceptable. Much of the Crockers site has a beautiful green mature shrubbery, hedgerows and trees. Some of the trees have TPOs on them, and the tree at the side of at the entrance of the site will probably have to go along with many others to allow the housing at this location. Much of this green lung of early will probably disappear immediately this application is approved. And then sometime in the future, we'll be asked to remove some more trees because of tree root damaging the new homes. Along with the loss of vegetation, there have been automatic loss of wildlife, which I understand is very vibrant in this part of Hillside, from bats to hedgehogs. The UK is near the bottom of the world league
Would you
with
please
regard.
sum up? Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to my last point, which is the closeness to the neighbouring properties by the planned homes, especially regards to the 3-storey homes overlooking the neighbours. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Okay, Al is the first. Is there a member? Sorry? You want to now? Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to everybody who has presented thus far this evening. As has been explained, this is an outline application seeking to establish the principle of development for up to 9 homes. Most of the concerns expressed by a large number of neighbours are reserved matters that would be considered in detail later if the outline permission was granted. I appreciate why some of those who've raised concerns will find this very frustrating, but we must adhere to the planning process. I have found the photo pack to be very useful. However, the photos have not allayed some of my concerns, many concerns, including the access point, TPO trees and hedges, and site elevation and relationship to neighbouring properties. I note the correction in the supplementary agenda that suggests that dwellings per hectare in the neighbouring area range from 27 to 47 DPH. Although the proposal is for DPH of 33.9, I am not clear in my mind that up to 9 homes of the nature shown in the indicative drawings could actually be accommodated. I understand that the applicant and WBC officers have been in discussion for some time, productive discussion, I understand. However, this is the first time the application has been seen by this planning committee. I would like to propose a deferral to allow for a site visit that I hope would help clarify matters on which I, and I suspect other members, remain unclear. If my proposal for deferral is accepted, I hope that the applicant appreciates why it is important for all members of the committee to feel that they fully understand the application before us and how a short delay for a site visit could assist with this.
Stephen?
Thank you. I'm very happy to second that proposal for a site visit. I think it is very sensible. Your comments at the beginning, Andrew, I also supported entirely. We are faced with an outline application with all of the details reserved. Now, this, unfortunately, is becoming a very common way of approaching planning applications. And I deeply regret it because I'm afraid if approval is given without being able to refer to what we can see are going to be important details, the principle is established. So it's really important, I think, for us to get at least as much information as we can about the site and the proximity of other dwellings, the site context, which, of course, the case officer is very familiar with. I understand that. And I'm sure his planning colleagues are also very familiar with it, but I'm not, and I suspect most of the committee members are not. So I would support Andrew's proposal for a site visit.
David?
Chair, thank you. I mean, I have a lot of sympathy with all the points that have been made by the residents and the board representatives. The sad fact is that this is in a major development location and we need to build more houses, and the obvious place to build them is where houses already are rather than the green fields of the countryside. Having said that, I totally support what Stephen's just said about we've got something that I won't say is a blank check, but it's a very blank diagram indeed in terms of what it is we're supposed to be approving. Could I ask one key piece of clarification? if we approve this and therefore approve the principle of development, are we also approving a maximum of 9 houses? Or can someone come back and say they've had a cutting plan for putting 12 or more on it?
That would require a separate application. 9 is the maximum that you would receive through determining this application. On the nose. 9.
Wayne?
I think I would build on that point. Yes, it would require a separate application, but the principle of development has been approved. It then makes it very easy, in my opinion, having sat for an appeal for 2 weeks. I absolutely support. I mean, I know this area, but I don't know. I didn't even know that house existed, so I don't know the context. And I think a site visit where we could actually go onto the site would be very useful.
Andrew?
Yeah, just, I mean, the principle of development here is sort of obvious because there's an existing house, though, isn't it? I mean, it's the number, isn't it? That's the important thing. And we're being asked to approve 9, but 9 may be too many. I mean, the fact they haven't managed to show it even on an outline drawing that they can accommodate 9 properties. Yeah. I mean, anyway, I definitely we need a site visit. You know, I mean, I think the residents would require us to have a site visit. I mean, they'd be amazed that we could make a decision on this without one.
Andrew?
I have made a proposal. I would like to add one other term to that proposal, and that is that the site visit take place between 3 and 3:30 on in the afternoon on a school day. That will add additional, I think, possibly pertinent information. So I would like to make a formal proposal for a site visit, the hours and the day that I've suggested for the reasons that I've given, simply to gather more information.
Thank you, Andrew. Just before that motion is voted on, can I just clarify whether you wanted to pose any questions to our highways officer with regard to the impact 9 dwellings or a net gain of 8 dwellings would have over a 1-hour period on a school day, weekday afternoon, in terms of your own convenience and the actual material bearing that will have on, for example, school traffic, where if parents in this location are using the opposite road to park their cars, okay, they can't block accesses, but likewise the 9 dwellings, should they be approved in future, what impact would they have upon that traffic on the street? I very much doubt the 9 dwellings would have their cars parked on the main road going to that school. And if they did all, by coincidence, have young families, they would be walking them. So again, it's just the level of bearing that has on your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, could we get that, please? If we're deferring this application, can we have that? Can we have that information at the time the thing comes back to the committee? Stephen?
I think Brian's suggesting that it may not be a very sound reason for deferring if the highways officer thinks this is acceptable. I think it's the context that we need to assess, perhaps, rather than whether there's a very acute. We know there's going to be an acute problem in school time. There's absolutely no question about that. We don't need to go on a site visit to know that, but we do need to go on a site visit to understand the context better. So I would urge you, Andrew, just to stick with the original proposal rather than add in the specific time we go, because we know that if we go when the school is closing, it will be like that. It is everywhere where schools are closed.
I'm happy to accept that.
Anytime you go near any school during school let out or during school drop off, it is crowded. There's no question about that. I live near a school. So there is a proposal for a site visit. All those in favor?
Seconded.
It's been seconded. All those in Unanimous, it is deferred to the next committee meeting. Okay, this is not the end of the meeting, by the way. There's still 2 more applications if you're really thrilled by having coming more. Okay. Okay, I'd like to note that item 117 has been withdrawn. And so number 118, application number 213587, Stefan will be giving us the information.
Thank you, Chair. So this is, as Rochelle said, agenda number 118 at Strouds in Remenham. The application consists of 1 detached dwelling in part of what was once the Park Place estate and is a registered park and garden. In 2008, an application was submitted and approved to renovate Park Place itself and consolidate a number of buildings into several new dwellings. Stroud would form one of these new dwellings. An application for exactly the same development was approved in 2018. That permission has lapsed and has not been implemented. The application has been submitted alongside agenda number 117, which has been withdrawn for ancillary estate management buildings. However, this will not be seen, as I've said, will not be seen by the committee due to some unresolved issues to do with highways and access. However, it should be noted that the applications are related. This is a site location plan. You can see the location of the new dwelling here. These are the north and south elevations, so the front and rear elevations. These are the east and west elevations. The house consists of 1 large block to the front and then 2 wings which go to the north. This is the proposed ground floor plan. This is the proposed first floor plan. I have included some photos. It's relatively large landscape, so it's a little bit difficult to show you the context. But this would be the location of the house at an avenue of trees which has already been planted. This is the location of the house from the east. So you can see the avenue of trees here. And the house would be here. This is the view from the main house towards the south. The River Thames is beyond the crest of the hill here. The site slopes down at that point down to the Thames and Wargrave Road. This is just a picture of the existing access to the site up here. We recommend that this application is approved subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement requiring the submission of an integrated estate management plan which seeks to conserve the special features of the registered park and garden and requires submission of further landscaping details and other details. This approach has been taken on other applications within the Park Place site and the application that's already been approved. Thank you.
Okay. Stephen?
Thank you. I have to say, in my view, the proposed new dwelling is spectacularly unattractive. But I'm afraid that is a fairly immaterial point because it is the same as the one that's already been approved. And as far as I'm aware, and I stand to be corrected, but there are no significant changes in circumstance that could justify our going back and overturning the original permissions granted in 2017 and 2018. So I think whatever one might think about the quality of the application, we have no choice but to approve it.
Is it?
Reluctantly, I think it is. Yeah.
Second that.
Seconded? Anyone? All those in favor?
I'd just like to make a comment,
Okay.
if you don't mind. I
Go
was
ahead.
quite amused by the proposed erection of one detached dwelling.
Yes, it does sound like a modest little place, doesn't it? Yes.
Holiday place, the
Social housing.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I think we vote. don't we?
I'll go to the vote, please.
Those in favour of the officer.
All those in favor of the officer's recommendation? That's unanimous. Last application, 230219, units 31 to 33, Sutton's Business Park, Sutton's.
Just waiting for the officer to make the.
Okay, we're waiting for the officer to come in.
Doing it yourself, Brian.
Will, so I'm just making a presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just share my screen now. On to the beginning, so bear with me. There we go. Okay, thank you, Chair. Sorry, this apologies for the delay. This application is for Unit 31 to 33 Sutton's Business Park. In Early, it's a full application for the demolition of the existing commercial building on site and the erection of a new building to provide Class B2, B8, which is general industrial and storage and distribution, with ancillary office space plus associated storage areas, car parking, access and landscaping. The application is brought before you tonight at Planning Committee because it's a major planning application. This proposal has been considered in detail from transport, design, access, economic, social and environmental perspective. It will be taller than the existing building on site. Let me just go to, there we go. Unit 31 and 33 at the north of your screen. The below shows distribution of other centres, modern things. Sorry.
Didn't realise he was so
Okay.
quick. Sorry.
It's worth noting that a previous application was approved by committee in 2018. This was never implemented and is similar to current proposal. Do you want to?
Yeah, so the difference with this current proposal to the one in 2018 was a small difference in height, which is 0.4 metres in eaves height, no, 0.5 metres in eaves height, yeah, and 0.4 metres in ridge height. The width of the building remained the same as the previous consent, and there will also be minor alterations to the parking arrangements. Proposed development has a larger cubic capacity than the existing building, which make the most effective use out of the land available for commercial activities. Yeah, back on that one. Yeah, so the new site layout will set the building further towards the rear of the site, closer towards the railway line. Servicing and car parking areas will be located to the front of the site. The service yard will be accessed via the private service road to the west, and car parking will be accessed towards the front. Mature trees along the front and along the boundaries of the site will soften the visual impact from the service yard from the street scene. The development is well contained within the plot, maintains appropriate separation distances with the neighbouring properties, and introduces a building height which is comparative to several industrial units in the business park. So despite the shortfall of the development to reach the BREEAM excellent rating, the identified economic and social benefits of the scheme are considered to outweigh the limited conflict with sustainability standards in the local plan. So all consultees responded with no objections, subject to the conditions outlined in Appendix 1 of the committee report. The application is therefore recommended for approval, conditional approval.
Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. This proposal to replace an existing building and help with the rejuvenation of this important business park has many merits. I have no concerns over the very slightly increased height, over parking provision or any other matters. However, I do have one question, and it may be that I've simply overlooked this, but I've not seen any reference to EV charging points in the public documents pack. Are these planned?
The report, the information provided did say that they would provide EV charging points. However, in the highway statement, they said that this would be within the building control regulations.
I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Stephen?
Thank you. I can understand why you were surprised by how quick we are. This is fairly unprecedented. Normally you could have been at home and still got here in time, but a seamless transfer, I have to say, from one to the other as well. So very good. There really is very little to say on this application. It is replacing buildings of a similar type or a similar function. There are no objections by any of the statutory consultees or neighbours. I really don't think we detain ourselves any longer. We can go to the vote on this. So I would propose that we approve.
David? Yeah, all those in favour?
Subject to the amended condition.
Subject to the amended conditions. All those in favour? That's unanimous. It's passed.